Right now, your phone probably has something like 47 apps sitting on it. On top of that, a streaming service with 10,000 different things you could watch, a podcast covering pretty much every topic humans have ever come up with. And somehow, despite all of that, you still find yourself bored sometimes. So here's a question almost nobody thinks to ask, and we're not talking about medieval people, or ancient Romans, or even the Egyptians. We're going back way further than that. 100,000, even 200,000 years. Back to a time with no writing, no art, no music, no language the way we'd recognize it today. Just people sitting there with absolutely nothing to fill the time. And the answer to what they did changes a lot of what we think we know about creativity and religion. It even reshapes how we understand the way your brain actually works. But first, did boredom even exist back then? That's an actual ongoing scientific debate. For a long time, researchers assumed our earliest ancestors were far too busy surviving to ever get bored. Every waking hour, the thinking went, was hunting, gathering, or building shelter. Zero downtime. That assumption, it turns out, was wrong. Very wrong. And the person who proved it was studying a group of people still living close to that original human lifestyle. In 1966, Anthropologist Marshall Sahlins published a paper that flipped that entire assumption on its head. He'd spent years with the Kamsan people of the Kalahari Desert. What he found? They worked roughly 15 to 20 hours a week, not per day, per week. That's it. The rest of the time was spent resting, talking, sitting around, doing essentially nothing. Sahlins ended up calling them the original affluent society, not because of possessions, but because of time. More free time than most people living today will ever get. So the real question isn't whether ancient humans got bored. It's what they actually did once boredom set in. Let's start with the obvious answer. They played. Sounds simple. It isn't. In 2010, archaeologist Francesco D'Arico and his team examined a collection of shells from Blombos Cave in South Africa. The shells were 75,000 years old, drilled through with holes coated in red ochre. These weren't tools. They weren't weapons. They weren't food either. They were beads. Someone 75,000 years ago sat down with nothing better to do and made themselves jewelry. That's the oldest known art object in human history. And it started as a cure for boredom. Here's the part that's genuinely interesting. Making those beads would have taken hours, maybe entire days. Drilling through shell with a stone tool. No electricity, no metal, no shortcuts. That's a very long afternoon of tedious work. And someone chose to do it anyway, because the alternative was staring at a cave wall, doing nothing at all. Necessity didn't invent art. Boredom did. The exact same pattern shows up again with music. In 2008, researchers digging in a cave in southern Germany found a flute. It was carved from a vulture's bone with 5 carefully placed finger holes. It was 40,000 years old. Someone 40,000 years ago, long before agriculture, before cities, before anything resembling civilization, sat down and invented music, not out of necessity, because they had a free afternoon and a bird bone lying around. And it turns out music might genuinely be what the brain reaches for when it has nothing else to process. Neuroscientist Daniel Levitin, who studies where music comes from, argues musical ability actually predates language itself. Our brains were wired for rhythm and melody before we could form complex sentences, because rhythm is pattern recognition, and pattern recognition is what kept early humans alive. But boredom didn't just give us art and music, it gave us something even more powerful. It gave us imagination. Think about this for a second. You can't actually be bored without a concept of time. To feel bored, you have to know this moment is dragging on too long. You have to sense that something else could be happening, that the future exists, and it might be better than right now. In a real sense, boredom is the first sign a brain has developed the ability to imagine things that don't exist yet. Animals don't experience boredom the same way humans do. A dog waiting by the door for its owner isn't bored, it's just waiting. It has no concept of what else it could possibly be doing instead. But a human sitting in a cave 100,000 years ago, staring into a fire with nothing to do, starts to wonder, what if tomorrow's hunt goes wrong? What if that sound outside is a predator? What's on the other side of that mountain? Where do we go when we die? Every question religion has ever asked, every question philosophy has ever raised, every question science is still chasing, all of it started the exact same way. Someone was bored and their mind started to wander. In 2013, psychologist Sandy Mann published research showing boredom significantly boosts creative output. She had people do the single most boring task she could invent, copying numbers out of a phone book. Then she tested their creativity immediately afterward. The bored group dramatically outperformed everyone else, because boredom forces the brain to start generating its own stimulation from scratch. And left to its own devices, the brain turns out to be extraordinary. But there's one more thing ancient humans did when bored, and it's arguably the one that mattered most. They talked, not about hunting, not about food or logistics. They told stories. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar, the same researcher who found human social groups naturally cap around 150 people, spent years studying what humans actually talk about when nothing important is on the table. His finding, roughly 65% of all human conversation is basically gossip. Who did what? Who said what? What happened to someone you both happen to know? Sounds like a waste of time. It really wasn't. Dunbar argues language itself didn't evolve for practical communication at all. It evolved for social bonding. Before language, primates bonded through physical grooming. But grooming takes real time and it's strictly one-to-one. You can only groom one friend at once. Language replaced grooming entirely. Now you could bond with 3 people at once. 10. An entire group gathered around a fire. You could tell a story about someone who wasn't even in the room. You could build trust with people you'd never physically touched. Language, and by extension, human civilization, didn't emerge because we needed to coordinate hunts. It emerged because people were sitting around with nothing to do and started talking about each other. Boredom invented gossip. And gossip, in turn, invented society. So here's where all of this lands. 75,000 years ago, someone bored in a cave made a bead. 40,000 years ago, someone bored in a different cave made a flute. And somewhere in between, people sitting around fires with nothing to do started asking questions nobody had answers to. Questions about death, about the sky, about why anything is the way it is. Some of those questions eventually became religion. Some became science, some became art, and some became you, lying awake at 2 a.m. with your phone resting on your chest, thinking about nothing in particular. Here's the part almost nobody talks about. Modern psychology has a name for what happens when boredom gets eliminated completely. They call it cognitive overload. When every single moment is stimulated, the brain never gets a chance to do what it was actually built to do in the quiet moments. Process, consolidate, create. The default mode network, the part of your brain that switches on when you're doing nothing at all, is the exact same network responsible for creativity, self-reflection, and empathy. It only activates when you're bored. We spent roughly 300,000 years learning how to fill silence with something meaningful. Then we invented the smartphone, and we've basically been filling that silence ever since. But every time you set the phone down and just sit with nothing for a moment, every time your mind starts to wander and you actually let it happen, you're doing the exact same thing that person in the cave was doing. The same thing that produced the beat. The same thing that produced the flute. The same thing that looked up at the stars and started asking why. Boredom didn't hold ancient humans back. It's what made them human. And it might be capable of doing the exact same thing for you if you let it.